All right, and now it is my very great pleasure to introduce our speaker this evening. She is a member of the AFT PD ELL cadre. So she works developing professional development for the AFT, and we are so pleased to have her here tonight. Welcome, Aurelie.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and welcome everyone. Bienvenidos to Scaffolding with Visuals and Linguistic Support. This webinar is part of the AFT's ELL Literacy Series, and it is based on the work from AFT's Project ELITE. ELITE stands for Expanding Literacy Instruction by Tutoring English Learners. And if you are an AFT member and want to find out more about professional development on this and other topics relating to literacy and English language learners, please contact Lisa Dickinson, Director of Professional Development and member engagement at AFT. We will share more information on this at the end of our seminar. All right. Now, this webinar is based on Dr. Diane August's research and research findings of the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine. The methods used to support English learners are evidence-based. What does that mean? Evidence-based means that research that has used these methods produces better outcomes in students, including English learners, compared with students whose teachers did not use these methods. Outcomes vary depending on methods and range from stronger foundational reading skills to enhanced academic language, comprehension, and writing. And you can see there some of the project goals. Our goal today is to provide you with information that will guide you in using visual and linguistic supports to enhance students' comprehension of text. You may be familiar with some of the information we will be sharing and hope that it will help to validate your use of these strategies so that you can make well-informed, research-based instructional decisions. Okay, let's take a look here. We should be having a little bit of a poll. I'd like you to take a look. Just take a moment. Do you speak more than one language? Just answer a simple yes or no. And just waiting to make sure that folks have an opportunity to use that poll question. Excellent. I see some wonderful answers here pretty soon. Okay, let's take a look. Oh, this is an excellent result here. We have quite a few bilinguals and multilinguals, and we certainly have some of you who do not speak another language, although I'm sure you have some other special languages that you may know. But even if you're not familiar with learning a new language, you are familiar with the challenges of learning something new. And often we find that we experience success more rapidly when we have the right supports in place. And that's why we're here today, is to find what some of the supports could be for our students. Scaffolding. This is a word that we use very often in education. Let's take a look at what it means. It is the process through which a teacher adds supports for students to enhance understanding, to help with mastering tasks, and more importantly, to move students towards more and greater independence. Now, we take a think about visual supports. We're going to include gestures, demonstrations, images, videos, movies, and graphic organizers. But we're also going to take a look at linguistic supports, and they include glossing. And glossing is a brief explanation or definition or word of a word or phrase in a text. It could be a note in the margin or an oral explanation, such as this, or a translation, okay, in the reader's actual language. Linguistic supports also include supplemental questions with response frames and interactive read-alouds in writing frames and word banks. And we're going to take a look at all of this in the next few slides. All right. Now, let's take a look at visual supports. Visual supports might be used to demonstrate instructions, clarify the meaning of words and phrases, and reinforce language learning. We will be using a video as a visual support in just a minute. The following video that you're going to see is from the website Coloring Colorado. It is a bilingual site for educators and families. And if you're not familiar with Coloring Colorado, or you have not visited the website in a while, I really encourage you to take a little time to explore the site. You will just be amazed at the wealth of information you will find there, and we will share information about this site again at the end of our presentation. As you view the following video, please just try to identify ways that the teacher provides visual supports for her students. You can drop some of those ideas in the chat if you like. Let's just take a moment and really take in the video of a high school ELL teacher.
My favorite part about my job. How much time do you have?
Michelle Lawrence Bigger teaches English language learners in Buffalo, New York.
A favorite part of my job is when a SEAL comes to me and tells me, "Miss, I couldn't put this book down. It was like television." To see the look on their face when they have succeeded with something. I could go on for days telling you what my favorite part of my job is.
Michelle teaches high school ELLs. Her students range in age from 14 to 19 and range in English proficiency from beginner to intermediate. Many are also refugees.
I speak Arabic and English.
Quran and English.
Somali and English.
Kizigbo, Swahili, my mind, and English.
Chin. And not much English.
Michelle's class curriculum contains a lot of fiction reading, like adapted versions of Sinbad, Frankenstein, and today's text, A Christmas Carol. But language and cultural barriers make comprehension one of the trickiest reading skills for ELLs to master.
So Z help him. What do we call it?
Michelle and her students aren't daunted, though. There are lots of strategies to help, and many of them are useful even before reading begins.
I am here to help you. If you just say, take this book and read it on your own, and they don't get it, they're not going to understand it, and so how could they enjoy it? I believe that if you set a student up for success, success breeds success. Before we read Chapter 2, there are 3 vocabulary words that I want to make sure you understand.
Pre-reading strategies help lay the groundwork for students so that they can get the most out of the upcoming reading. For example, whether it's fiction or a textbook, take time to preview the content, including any new vocabulary, before the students begin reading.
Previewing is very important because, first of all, there are a lot of vocabulary words students won't know. So what words are really important? What do I need to pre-teach in this? And then when they read, they'll recognize the words, and it won't be a difficulty understanding the vocabulary words that have been identified.
Today, Michelle is preparing the class for Chapter 2 of A Christmas Carol.
This word is wept. Can you say that?
Wept.
Yesterday I wept, but today I weep because I'm going to miss you when we go home for Thanksgiving.
Let's hit pause on this performance. Acting is actually a fun and effective way to engage students and help them understand content.
Okay. So what does weep mean?
You cry.
It means to cry. okay? And look here, I have wept and cried. I have weep and cry. These two words, weep and cry, mean the same. What do we call two words that mean the same? Synonym.
Notice that Michelle uses every
Okay, I see some wonderful ideas, the acting, the previewing of the content. And this is really just a little bit of a tease. I hope that you take the time to go to the website and really see the full video. It has some great examples of how a teacher can really scaffold the reading instruction for the students. I really would like you to, really think about using visuals, but actually you need to keep some things into, put some things into consideration as you select those visuals. There are some variables such as selecting visuals that are age and grade appropriate for those students, that they are images, videos, and GIFs that represent the students in your class and the diversity of your students, that they clearly demonstrate the meaning of the words so that you can really bring the information to the reader in a way that is respectful. So I also want to remind you that the visuals mainly are free, but really keep in mind that there are some visuals that you may need some type of attribution. So really the age and grade appropriately, I love that people are using the chat and really kind of really just reinforcing the ideas that are being shared here. So wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. So let's take a look. As we think about graphic organizers, they are a visual support, and you're probably very familiar with them. There are several types of graphic organizers that can be used to support students when they're reading or writing. And you can use right now your camera function to scan that QR code on the slide to access the website creately.com, where you will find samples of graphic organizers. It's up to you, or you can just access the website creately.com. But graphic organizers can be used for teaching, such as those KWL charts. They help teachers gather information about a student's knowledge of a topic, what the reader already knows, what the reader wants to learn, and what the reader has learned after a lesson or a series of lessons. We have our graphic organizers to develop academic language, such as 4 squares. Vocabulary graphic organizers can help students learn vocabulary by asking students for the following information about a word: the definition, a sentence that uses that word, a synonym or an antonym. Graphic organizers can also be used to support reading with sequence charts, and sequence charts can help students visualize the order or steps or process of a timeline or events. We can have story maps, and the story maps help students identify the different elements of a narrative, such as characters, setting, and plots. And we, of course, can have graphic organizers to scaffold the writing process. Graphic organizers can be aligned with the writing purpose, such as descriptive, narrative, argumentative, and explanatory. And these help students complete the information needed to write the text aligned with any of these purposes. Don't know if anyone had a chance, again, to access this website by just using your phone. But again, I invite you to check out the graphic organizers as a visual support for your students. Okay. Now, let's take a look at another visual support, which is really the use of an image. As we take a look here, we can see that images are very effective, right? They really start to really bring the reader into the text. Here's an example of a visual support for the chapter 1 of the text, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. Now, for this presentation, we are going to use excerpts from The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. First of all, it is just a wonderful story. And secondly, it is a story that has been translated into nearly 40 languages. So I think that, you're going to be able to see how we can take a complex text and bring it to our students so that they can actually enjoy a wonderful story. You see here, Dorothy lived in the midst of the great Kansas prairies. And here is really a nice visual of a prairie to really bring the reader to where we want to be. Now, we can take a look also how we can use GIFs and other image, to bring concepts and unfamiliar ideas to our students. The cyclone has set the house down very gently. For a cyclone in the midst or the middle of a country of marvelous beauty. So there you see, again, the power of having an image to support comprehension. Now we're going to begin to examine the use of linguistic supports to enhance the comprehension of text. Linguistic supports can be used to support students in understanding words, phrases, sentences, as well as the discourse level of text. We are going to take a look at all of these ideas in the next slides. This slide displays the types of linguistic supports that can be used for English learners at 3 different levels of proficiency. Entering and emergent, that's your beginning level, intermediate, and then advanced. Now, what I like to do, I would like you to focus on that discourse level of this slide. Look at the entering and emerging level sentence. Frames are provided, and a sentence frame is really a complete sentence, in which students are given that, and it's a structure that the students kind of have to fill in the blank with words. At the intermediate level, there are sentence stems, and these are a phrase or part of a sentence with a missing part. Your student would use these to complete the phrase with their own words. For example, I like to blank. Your students might say, I like to play, and they would then write this word to complete the sentence. And the sentence stems really give students that kind of inertia to get their thoughts really going and get their thoughts on paper. What I really want you to also note is that the use of the home language is a support that can be utilized at all levels of language proficiency. Okay. Now, let's get ready for another poll. I'd like you to take a moment and think about what language is most frequently spoken by English learners in your school. Is it Spanish, Chinese, Arabic, maybe Somali, Nepali, or other? Something all together. Just take a minute to really put in your ideas. Okay, I'm just going to pause for a minute just to give everyone a chance to take a look and make sure that you get the poll question answered. I see a lot of, I even see some Portuguese, certainly Spanish, Korean. Excellent ideas. Okay, let's go see where people fall here. Well, okay. Certainly, there's quite a few others, which I think is excellent. It really speaks to the wonderful diversity that we have in our country and in our schools. So that is great. I see quite a bit here, of Somali, Spanish. This is wonderful. And I think one of the real takeaways right now is that there are so many wonderful tools to help us and help our students access their home language and for us to access their home language. And they go, even if they're not perfect, even if they go beyond just the Google Translate, but it really does help us to try to honor the, bilingualism as a real asset, in our schools. So this is great to see this. All right, now let's take a look at the word or phrase level. We're going to take this apart as we take a look at linguistics of words. And we'll begin by thinking about the words. In the next set of slides, we will elaborate more on these three characteristics of words. We have word frequency, the importance of the word to understanding the text, and the conceptual complexity of the word. Is how concrete is that word? Is it difficult to represent that word in an image? All right, so let's take a look at this part of it. All right. We do want to make sure that we support our students through the whole reading process, before, during, after, and just throughout. So if you take a look at this slide, it really shows that pre-teaching key vocabulary before reading can ensure that your students can begin to comprehend the gist of the text. And that was one of those ideas that we were exposed to in the video from Colorín Colorado. And we can have oral glossing during the reading, and it's generally used for the words and phrases that are more concrete. And remember, that glossing is that explanation, that oral explanation that you might give as you're reading a text. It is important that teachers have the definitions handy prior to the lesson. That way they can give an accurate definition. And some curricular materials actually do provide glossaries in the margins for easy reference. Student glossaries can take many forms. Some examples can appear in the forthcoming slides, and we'll give you something to take a look at here soon. All right. I like this slide because it really, for words that are more abstract, you really want to use multiple images and multimedia that includes maybe the GIFs, the little animated images or soundless videos that loop around. Consider using the teaching routine that is displayed in this example. I really love it. I love that there's all these multiple exposures to the word for the student. You can start out by reading the definition of the word. You connect it to the image. Then you provide a home language translation. You can have students spell and say the word. You can have students then discuss the word with a peer. And finally, connect that word back to the story, back to the text. If you look there in the story, Dorothy's dog Toto makes Dorothy happy. The story says that Toto saved Dorothy from growing as great as her other surroundings. As we take a look at what would be a difficult word to really define for students, but we have multiple ways for them to access this word. Okay. Now, you can see by this slide, there are models for glossing while reading. The teachers has figured out which words the students need to have gloss, and then they have looked up the definitions that match the word meanings in the text prior to the lesson. In If the target words can be easily gestured, then by all means, please use gestures. Please use your hands. Please use anything that is really going to help the student understand the text and understand the word at this word level. We are going to actually see a video. And as you view, and it's some great examples of glossing in the text, but as you view the video, think about how you would use glossing in a text that you're going to teach, in the near future, maybe tomorrow. Not if you're anywhere near Syracuse, because we're going to have a blizzard, but and maybe a snow day if we keep our fingers crossed. But maybe really think about some of the important vocabulary that you want your students to know. What are some gestures that you can use to really help our students internalize that? Is there a gesture that you would use, okay, for that word? So keep in mind, right now, we're going to take a look at a video, again, from the wonderful website, Colorín Colorado. And if you want to view the video in its entirety, please know that you can always go to the website right after this webinar. Okay.
Funding for Common Core State Standards and ELLs is provided by the American Federation of Teachers Innovation Fund.
Okay, good morning. So yesterday we started looking at the text Travels with Charlie by John Steinbeck. And
Katie Soto is using Steinbeck's writing to help her 7th grade ELLs develop important Common Core skills.
Each day was just a small chunk of text, a paragraph actually, and it was focused on taking a close look at that paragraph and then answering some text-dependent questions.
To prepare them, she opens the lesson by focusing in on some of the passage's key vocabulary.
Just like yesterday, before we take a look at the actual text, we need to look at some vocabulary.
In particular, she highlights words that she thinks will be trickiest for her students, but words that are also essential to understanding the text.
This is a hard one. It was hard for me. I kept stumbling over the pronunciations.
Ms. Soto's approach to vocabulary is multi-layered. She displays the word,
everybody say taciturn.
Taciturn.
Good.
gives a simple definition, uses a related image, and provides an example sentence. She also encourages the students to provide real-world examples. This helps them connect with the vocabulary more easily and provides Ms. Soto with an opportunity for informal assessment.
Who's a taciturn student in this classroom? Who's a taciturn student?
Rayhan.
Rayhan. Okay, anybody else?
Anthony.
Anthony, really?
What? I always talk.
Maybe normally. He's doing the opposite. He's becoming quieter.
Not all new words and phrases need such extended instruction, though. Ms. Soto also incorporates embedded vocabulary instruction into her lesson. One way is by providing each student with a glossary.
We're going to look at the next piece of text today. It's in front of you. Just like yesterday, we're looking at one section, a paragraph. To your left, you see the text. There are some words highlighted in bold that are defined to the right. What's that called again? Words to the side or at the bottom? Glossary. You're going to need to rely on this glossary even more, I think, than you did yesterday. So as I read it out loud, I'm going to talk a little bit about the words. We learned a few. I'll talk about some of the other ones. And then when you're answering the questions with pairs afterwards, you're going to need to look back at the glossary to help you. Okay? I'm going to read from here on the smartboard, but you have it in front of you. I want you to listen carefully. After I finish reading it, we'll go over our questions, and then you'll work with your pairs to answer the questions, and we'll share out. Okay? Here we go. I soon discovered that if a wayfaring stranger, that means somebody who travels around,
Another embedded instruction technique Ms. Soto uses is that while she is reading the passage, she'll substitute in quick definitions to help with the student's comprehension.
A good alternative, that means another choice.
Vocabulary development is an important component in any lesson plan. With ELLs, though, it takes on even more weight since they are already playing catch-up and often don't have as many opportunities to develop their academic vocabulary outside the classroom.
And there is a drawback, a problem.
After reading through the passage, Ms. Soto has the students work in pairs to answer guided.
Okay, I like the comment, how the teacher is really getting the students to connect with the vocabulary. There were some really wonderful examples of glossing, really giving those oral explanations during the text. So again, if you'd like to see the video in its entirety, please go to the website Colorín Colorado, and you will find it there. And the links are also in the resource that we will be sharing with you. If you'd like to download that at the end of the webinar, that would also be another way for you to access this particular video. If you take a look here, on this slide, this is a model of glossing in the margins. This is something that curriculum developers or teachers would do in creating lessons to support students' comprehension of a passage. You want to note that the gloss words are highlighted in the text. You may also have digital curriculum that provides hyperlinks to word meanings instead of the definitions in the margins. So you can see Dorothy lived in the midst or the middle of the great Kansas prairies with Uncle Henry, who was a farmer, and Aunt Em, who was the farmer's wife. You see here the nice glossing in the margins example. I'm just also taking a look at some of your comments, and yes, the teacher was doing a nice job of giving those oral explanations during the text. Now let's take a look at how we can really support our students even after the reading. After the reading the text, you want to continue to support students by reviewing the words that were pre-taught or glossed. You want to make sure that this is reinforced, maybe with an image or a gesture, and then ask the students to follow up a follow-up question to really enhance comprehension of the text. So let's take a look. Aunt Em dropped her work and came to the door. One glance or a quick look told her of the danger close at hand. What did Aunt Em see when she glanced outside? Use the word glance in your sentence. You see the wonderful little GIF there. And again, a follow-up question to really try to get the students to use the word glance and really get them to help that in their response. Yes, we certainly want to make sure that we provide our wait time for our students as they're formulating that response. Thank you for those ideas. Okay, let's take a look. And this is a glossary model that demonstrates another way to support students. For older students, glossaries might be organized as above, with a space where students can review the word to help them remember. Glossaries can also be constructed so that students fill in some of the information provided above, such as translations, examples from the text, cognate status. This is just another way to really reinforce comprehension and meaning. Okay. Now, let's take a look at linguistic supports, all right? And let's examine how we go beyond the word and sentence level of language and focus more on the whole text, the discourse level. One way to enhance comprehension at the discourse level is to ask guiding and supplemental questions. So guiding questions ask about central ideas, while supplemental questions ask about details. Guiding and supplemental questions should be questions that require the reader to go back to the text. Okay. and to really find that evidence to answer the questions. Now let's take a look. Here you see the difference between the text-dependent questions and questions that are not text-dependent. Non-text dependent, have you ever been to Kansas? Text-dependent, what state did Dorothy live in? A close read requires the reader to go back to the text to find evidence. The questions should not be answered solely on a personal opinion. However, we understand that occasionally non-text dependent questions are important, and they serve an important purpose, which is helping students activate their background, which is a key component of reading comprehension. This slide describes the process for creating, guiding, and supplemental questions. So it's a little bit of, I want you to stay with me because really we're going to take apart this process. We're going to start by identifying a state English language arts standard that needs to be met. And we're going to take the generic STEM. It's a question that if answered really supports the students in meeting that standard. For example, let's select the standard determines central ideas or themes of a text. To create a guiding question, you want to use the STEM, what is the central idea, of the second paragraph, for example, and apply it to the anchor text. In this case, the anchor text, it was Toto that made Dorothy laugh and saved her from growing as gray as her other surroundings. Toto was not gray. He was a little black dog with long silky hair and small black eyes that twinkled merrily on either side of his funny wee nose. Toto played all day long, and Dorothy played with him and loved him dearly. Think about the guiding question, what do we know about Toto? Okay, that guiding question, then central idea based on this part of the text. Now, what I'd like to do is I am going to read this excerpt from The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, and it's okay if you can't see it. It's a lot of text on the slide, but I'd like to just take a moment to read it to you because we're going to be thinking about guiding and supplemental questions that will help the reader comprehend this text. All right, and of course, we know we have this visual support to get us started. And let's just kind of listen and let's see what we can come up with to help our students get to the guiding and supplemental questions. There's a cyclone coming, Em. Uncle Henry called to his wife, I'll go look after the stock. And then he ran toward the sheds where the cows and horses were kept. Aunt Em dropped her work and came to the door. One glance told her of the danger close at hand. Quick, Dorothy, she screamed. Run for the cellar. Toto jumped out of Dorothy's arms and hid under the bed, and the girl started to get him. Aunt Em, badly frightened, threw open the trap door in the floor and climbed down the ladder into the small dark hole. Dorothy caught Toto at last and started to follow her aunt. But when she was halfway across the room, there came a great shriek from the wind, and the house shook so hard that she lost her footing and sat down suddenly upon the floor. Then a strange thing happened. The house whirled around 2 or 3 times and rose slowly through the air, and Dorothy felt as she were going up in a balloon. Once Toto got too near the open trap door and fell in. And at first the little girl thought she had lost him, but soon she saw one of his ears just sticking up through the hole, for the strong pressure of the air was keeping him up so that he could not fall. She crept to the hole, caught Toto by the ear, and dragged him into the room again, afterward closing the trap door so that no more accidents could happen. Now you see another model of guiding in supplemental questions. It describes and models methods to make it easier for the students to answer questions by restating information and defining key vocabulary prior to asking those questions. Danger means something that can hurt or harm. At glance or quick look told her that danger was close at hand. What did Aunt Em scream to Dorothy? And as you can see here, these are all ways that we can support our students as we're helping them answer the supplemental questions so that they can get to the central idea of the text. This slide models how to order supplemental questions to support comprehension. We want to adjust the number of questions by considering the complexity of the text and the levels of English proficiency of the students, of course. And the questions are based on the passage that I just read. So what did Uncle Henry do? Glance means a quick look. What did Aunt Em's glance tell her? What did Aunt Em tell Dorothy to do? What did Toto do? And so on. Here, though, we're going to talk a little bit more about differentiated response frames. And this is another linguistic support that we can use. And you can see here the level of scaffolding should be really adjusted for the English levels of the English, for the English proficiency of our students. For students with emergent levels of proficiency, you can provide the sentence frames and word banks. The omitted words in the sentence frames should be those most important for answering the questions. And for students with intermediate levels of proficiency, you can provide sentence starters and word banks. For students with advanced level of proficiency, you do not need to provide any framing, but you can provide a word bank or glossary to encourage the students to use keywords from the text. And we're going to see some great examples in just a second in the next few slides. Here again, guiding and supplemental questions. How did the family act as a cyclone approached? All right, and you can see what did Em tell Dorothy to do? And Em was frightened or afraid. What did she do because she was frightened or afraid? There was a great shriek, and a shriek is a loud and sharp sound. What made the shriek? This, I think, is really important for us to know because it really is, again, a way for us to think about our students and what we can do to support them based on their language proficiency. This slide displays the sentence frames to help English learners at the emerging level of proficiency answer those questions. The word banks in sentence frames are used for scaffolding. The words that are left out of the sentence, again, are those that are most important for answering the question and less likely for English learners to already know. In the first sentence, the words run and cellar are key to answering the question, and cellar is a word the English learner are probably less likely to know. So there you see other examples related to the text that was just read that would really help our students think about the central idea. Scaffolding responses at the intermediate level. This level of scaffolding is appropriate for English learners with more intermediate levels of proficiency. Mostly sentence starters are used. There are, really no word banks. All right, this is something that a transitioning or intermediate level student should be able to do. And at the advanced level, you can include a word bank. Okay, there are no real sentence frames, but it is optional to use the word bank because it provides clues to for some of the words that we need the students to be able to use in their response. Okay. And I see that there are some comments. I know that there are a lot of folks here who are familiar with using sentence frames and sentence starters. And really, I just really would like to, again, to invite you to think about that differentiation that we are posing with these slides. And we are now getting near the end of our presentation. Our goal was to provide you with information that will guide you in using visual and linguistic supports to enhance students' comprehension of text. Please add any comments or questions that you may have in the chat as I share some of the additional resources with you. All right. First and of all, I would like to just have you be aware of the article, Educating English Language Learners, a review of the latest research. It is an article by Dr. Diane August. It was published in the American Educator in the fall of 2018. It is a wonderful resource. She really speaks about 7 principles that we can use to design effective instruction for English learners. And certainly one of those principles would be to provide supports for our students so that they can access that grade level text. So please, I invite you to check it out, as well as really the latest article that I have read in the American Educator. It just was published in the winter, just this winter, and it is rethinking how to promote reading comprehension. And it's published by the American Educator, so you can access any of these articles online by searching the titles and AFT American Educator. I like this article because it really brings us back to thinking about the reader and how important it is for us to understand our readers, to know what their background knowledge is, and to really be able to build background knowledge so that they can access and comprehend text. And of course, my favorite site, Colorín Colorado, is the bilingual site that provides free research-based information, activities, and advice to families, schools, and communities, really just around the world. So this is really wonderful, and I can't say enough good things about it. I hope you have a chance to go and visit, and I hope that the videos just gave you a chance to see some of the things that you can get from this wonderful site. Now, I'd like to also, if you're an AFT member and you want to find out more PD, again, there's information here that you can contact Lisa Dickinson at edickinson@aft.org. I promised that I would have that information for you at the end of the webinar. I also would like to have you please consider registering for this upcoming webinar, Literacy and ELLs, Academic Language. The presenter is Betsy Sotomayor. She is a dear friend and super knowledgeable about English learners. I think she would love to have you back to come and view her webinar on April 14th from 6 to 7. And now, if there are any questions, I'd love to be able to entertain any of your questions.
Thank you so much for such a great presentation. And I'd like to ask everyone now to go to the Q&A widget if you have a question and type it in the Q&A widget. Also, you should now be able to download your professional development certificate if you answered the poll questions. It's best to do that now before you exit the webinar. All right, and we're already getting a few questions into the Q&A widget. Aurelie, here's our first question. There's a lot of information here. Where do you recommend I start?
Okay, there is a lot of information here. The first thing that I like to say is that if you think about supports and you think about visual supports, which is really the first thing that we started to talk about, you can get a lot, you can really bring the reader to the text by just adding an image, correct? But really it depends on your reader. What do they need? And I think that one of the things that we try to do is to kind of lay it out here, and really from what would be the easiest thing to do to probably a little bit more complex, as we talked about, from visual to linguistic supports. But I really like to be able to, to answer that question, I really would need to know what your students need. But I always like to start with a visual, an image, a video, or something that really just immediately brings the reader to the text and to the topic at hand, so that they can then have an entryway into the conversation of whatever story you happen to be reviewing or whatever content you happen to be reviewing.
Great. And what are your suggestions for great digital platforms for ELLs?
Digital platforms for ELLs?
Mm-hmm. Digital tools, I think, maybe.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I mean, there certainly are a lot of digital tools. I mean, you can start with something as simple as, if you're using Microsoft Word and you have things that are like an immersive reader, right? There's an immersive reader tool in Microsoft Word, and that can actually, the students can use, and they can easily go ahead and just have the text read to them. That's a really simple tool, and most people that have Microsoft Word can access that. I like that idea. But there are many tools out there. There are things, like Nearpod. There are tools that often, I think, Quizlet and Kahoot. There are many platforms and tools that are technology-based that work with our students. I really think it's about trying to find the tool that works for you. I happen to love Padlet as a tool that is online, that helps our students, because it has different modalities for students to express their answers. But the idea is that you can start with something simple. It's an immersive reader in which a student can have the text read to them.
Sarah asks, can you please explain the difference between sentence starters versus sentence frames?
Yes. I think I know that I went a little bit fast through that section. A sentence frame is really a frame in which a student fills in a blank, right? They have a word bank and they fill in the blank. The sentence is there, it is complete, right? So that the frame is already there. A sentence starter is just a part of a sentence. The complete sentence is not there. And you can provide students with a word bank to help them complete a sentence starter. But the idea is that the individual, the student themselves, would be the ones that would complete the sentence. They're asking more of the individual student at that point. That's why when I was referring to scaffolding the supplemental questions responses, I started with those sentence frames, which is a complete sentence, whereas students just add in a word, versus a sentence frame where it's a sentence starter or stem, in which the students are just given part of a phrase and they have to complete the sentence. I don't know. Is that clear? I hope that's clear.
Well, if Sarah is still having questions, you can put it in the chat and we can try and answer that for you. I think we have time for one more question. Kendra says, with ELLs, what are the signs that your student may also need an IEP? For example, a student is not growing and grasping specifically in reading and writing.
Okay, that's it's kind of difficult because that is not a simple question. It's actually and it's a complex question that probably deserves a complex answer. The first thing that I would have to say is that you want to make sure that the student is receiving the proper interventions prior to assuming that there needs to be a need for more intense testing and placement into special education. I really do believe that we need to make sure that we keep really good track and monitoring of our student learning. And then we can use that information to really try to build a student profile. And as we build that student profile, we can then use it to think about, is this growth, is this student growing in language, in development, and how does that compare to a student, that is similar to him or her from, same language, maybe same, age and so on. So, but it is a very complex question because there's so many factors, including attendance, including access to the education, that would, really play into that decision.
Thank you. This was such a great presentation, Aurelie. We really appreciate you joining us and sharing your expertise from your work with the AAFT PD cadre. And thank you all for joining us tonight for this webinar. We have more webinars coming up, including the ELL webinar that Aurelie mentioned, and as well as many other topics. So we hope you will join us for those, and I'm putting the link to that series as well as another series we have going on right now in the chat, and that's our wellness series. We hope you will join us for both of them. You can learn more about our reading initiative at sharemylesson.com/read.